I want to do something very, very exciting and totally fun, and yet almost impossible to do with language. And that is to talk about energy and how we can process energy, how we can play with energy, and how we can manifest via energy. As a spiritual channel, I love participating with energy in a very, very conscious form. And it's not something that's unique to me, but literally something that we all have come into this realm to participate with. The moment that we come into our embodiment, and what I mean by that is our physical incarnation where egg meets sperm, we have the opportunity to have consciousness literally at that moment. And we have the ability through consciousness, again, think of your brain turning on and beginning the recording, to process what's happening in this embodiment that's growing from literally nothing, cells, to something magical that we would call the birth of a child, which is you. That miracle of you literally being here. And of course, in the beginning, this was all done not through language, but literally through your feeling energy. This is something you've been doing forever, and a lot of times as we continue to mature, meaning as we get older, there's a part of us that wants to cling on to language or even traditional concepts and trying to understand something that's really innate. So when I talk about today about taking energy and translating into words, that's something that for me is very fun to do, very exciting to do, because as a clairaudient and a clairvoyant, the ability to see and process this information that's outside of this realm is done obviously through energy. And so participating with energy is something that we all do, and yet sometimes the question is, how do we do it? How do we control it? How do we direct our ability to manifest or to create? And these are actually great questions, but something that sometimes we get lost with, trying to focus on the structure being, again, language or the words. So I'm going to be using words, but most of all, I would want you to tune into this broadcast as a means by really, really feeling energetically those things that are being communicated outside of just the layer of language. And that, for some of you, will be really easy. Some of you will be a little bit challenged with that, and some will be maybe really frustrated at the idea that the words that are being used don't necessarily match what it is that you may be feeling yet. But if you stay open, which is a very important key, you'll find that going forward is something that's easy to digest, to understand, and of course to create remembrance. Now, my whole purpose in bringing this message is so that you can participate with energy in a much more fluid way. What I mean by fluid is not pushing or pulling on energy, because that's, of course, nonsense. And so I want to use the analogy of a wave. And everyone knows, or has been, I would hope, exposed to an ocean wave, where we have the wave literally rolling. And most people think, even in the scientific community, that energy is something that we process by having, let's call it a fuel. Let's pretend that this was a fuel rod, if you will. And in this rod, there was energy emanating from this rod, and because of that, it's creating something else. Let's call it nuclear fusion, right? And this is what we have in terms of our nuclear power plants. And the energy is thought to be coming from this place or this particular substance. And it's a common conception, but it's not necessarily true, because energy, we tend to only acknowledge it when it's moving from one place to another. So from this place to this place, then we see it, and at that point we see the energy or the fuel, and then sometimes we go to measure it, and we sometimes call it or reference it as work, right? The ability for energy to do something. And when I say do something, I want you to be feeling the masculine energy. The masculine being, of course, not just male, but think of yin and yang, where we have the male energy, which is to do, and also the being energy, which is the feminine. But as we tune in, as we really move into energy, energy is really that of a being space. And the more that you play with it, whether it's Tai Chi, Qigong, sometimes people play with the energy with regards to Reiki, and I'm pointing to my hands because oftentimes hands are a very common means of being able to shift and to play with energy. And yet, energy isn't limited, of course, just to this part of my anatomy, nor is it of yours, meaning we are designed to be able to feel energy in infinite ways, and sometimes in such infinite ways that we actually forget or go blind to how we can actually do it, meaning we're listening for the language. So when I go to talk about energy, I want you to be, again, listening, but at the same time really feeling how you are changed, altered, or even how you perceive when energy's flowing around you. Most of all, and as we continue to advance in the subject, it's something that you can participate with in terms of directing. Now, directing is not the same thing as forcing. So I want you to think of two people dancing, and we have two people dancing, and let's say it's an individual dance of this kind, and we have two parties that are very much in their individual space. At one point, there's an opportunity for these two to begin to sync. And then when they begin to sync, there is an opportunity for these two to become literally at one. Now, in the analogy of, let's say, slow dancing can be seen as a state where two people become so at one that there's an energy that we feel, whether we're watching ballroom dancing, whether we're watching hip-hop, it doesn't really matter what kind of dancing that we're watching. We can feel an energy from these two people moving into a state of oneness. And that oneness can be so significant that we can be actually fooled in terms of our minds to think that this couple may be together, meaning together in terms of, let's say, a romantic perspective. That could be done with ice skating as a pair. But when we feel energy, that oneness is something that's really beautiful to appreciate. It doesn't have to be necessarily in the personal relationship, obviously. But I want that to be recognized, because when we move into a state of going outside of this rhythm that's imbalanced, if I can use that term, and we go into an energy that suddenly there's a movement that becomes together at one, then you can feel that. And there's a knowingness. So when I go to work with somebody, let's say that someone was in the room and they asked me the question about their body. The first thing that I would do is, without necessarily even thinking, and I want you to become aware of that, is I will literally scan that body to see, like you would maybe perhaps visualize a river, meaning does a river have a natural flow to it, or are there blocks in the river that's taking it, to the left or to the right, or literally damming it up so it has to go way, way, way left, perhaps hundreds of feet or perhaps miles. And when we look at a body, the body is designed actually to process energy in a balanced way. But if we're not balanced, and I'm going to tip my body for a moment for you to see it, the body will literally go to tip in a particular kind of way, and yet it will go to correct itself. But in correcting itself, it doesn't necessarily always deal with the imbalance of the energy. It just changes, if you can see my head, it changes the idea that we're seeing straight, but as you can tell, I'm not necessarily sitting up straight. And so this is how we can fool ourselves energetically. And we don't want to do that. We want to be able to become aligned, again, going back to the dancing scenario, where we become literally at one. Now, as a practice, something that I think is really a lot of fun to do, you can actually practice becoming at one with many different kinds of energy. Let's just take the energy of light. Light is an infinite resource, something that's really, really cool to play with. And I say light, it could be the sun, it could be a flashlight, it could be a candle. It doesn't really matter what the source of the light is, because the energy is the same. And that's something I want to talk about in half a moment, because there seems to be a thought that different kinds of energy resonates or is expressed in different kinds of way. What I want to share is that literally all energy comes from the same, and hear the word, source. And in this energy, the only time that we really see, we'll call the benefits of energy, is when energy becomes imbalanced. What I mean by that is, in a balanced state, think of a teeter-totter, where we have a true equilibrium. We don't necessarily see the balance of the embodiment. Excuse me. We don't necessarily see the energy move. The moment that we take this balance and we shift it to an imbalanced state, we start to see movement. In that space is when we tend to observe, basically think, or become aware of how energy is being transported from one end to the other, to the other, to the other, to the other. And this is what we call duality, right? Meaning everything here, light, dark, female, male, is all done in this plane of duality, which is extremely simple. But let me share with you that this perception of duality isn't true. And what I mean by that is our abilities to express energetically are not limited to binary numbers, zeros and ones, or light and dark. There's a lot of space in between, and yet we haven't necessarily, I'll use the terms, played with that or learned that to the point that we can play outside of just this duality. And we tend to only observe energy when it is moving, when it goes from hot to cold, cold to hot, rain to snow, snow, and then of course it can evaporate and become steam. And these are all different states of energy, energetic change. At the same time, the energy itself isn't changing. And that's the part that's sometimes confusing, because we want to think or believe even that energy is changing from one form to another, meaning an ice cube to steam is a change of energy that can be measured, delta, scientifically, but that's not necessarily what I want you to give focused attention to as much as the energy doesn't change. It's changing its state or its illusion of appearance, but its potential hasn't ever changed. And that state of oneness is something really cool. Yet, again, we get lost in the idea because of movement. We're always looking for the movement of the energy. Again, think of a wave where the energy is up or the energy is down. And think of the stock market going up or going down. Think of our health. Our health is going up or health is going down. Our interrelationships oftentimes are measured in that same kind of duality. I'm happy and then I'm sad. And these are two basic states of energy that actually we learn or are conditioned upon us as a child. When I say child, a very young baby, we can see the baby who's very happy because the energy in the room is very cool or very exciting. And if it isn't cool, meaning if mom and dad are fighting or their other energy that doesn't quite feel right, it can cause, we'll call it spiritual indigestion, where there's a feeling within the baby that something's not right. And they don't know how to deal with that. And so normally the baby will cry, that as an emotion. Sometimes the baby might get mad, be very, very angry and scream. And that would be a whole different kind of expression. But what's happening is that the body is getting used to the idea of how to process this energy. And because of the mind then takes these feelings, if you will, and I'm talking about physical feelings, and it begins to compartmentalize them, that this goes here and this goes here, this is happiness, this is sadness, this is a neutral emotion. And so we take energy in its infinite form and we reduce it to some three basic concepts. We're happy, we're sad, or we're just fine. Again, not bad, but hardly the ability to express energy in its infinite. And that's why I want you to listen beyond my words. So when we talk about energy as a concept, the most important thing that I can bring to all of our attention, and that's a key word, is the concept of focused energy. Now, when I say focused energy, we're still talking about the concept of energy, but now we're giving attention to it. So as I'm speaking to you, I'm directing, this dialogue, and you are listening, and maybe you're allowing your mind to go to the places, meaning you're allowing yourself to think about what's happening or giving consideration to some of your own energetic experiences, which is fine. It's all normal. But the more that you give yourself focused attention to be really, really at one, a state of complete oneness, then there's something that takes place in that choice, that focused attention, that is absolutely magical. And as a word, I'm going to use the word desire. So when we have a desire, which sometimes people want to think of a desire that comes from the mind, which isn't necessarily wrong, but it's certainly not encompassing of the whole thing. That would be like saying, as a concept, as a word, that sex and love are the same things. They can be, but they're not necessarily always the same. Someone can participate sexually and not necessarily participate in a true act of love, meaning the whole thing of love. It can be just a sexual act. So when we talk about desire, it is possible to participate in a desire that's coming from here, meaning my mind, that's very, very different than being able to express what I will call an innate desire. When we have an innate desire, our focused attention becomes very, very strong. And oftentimes within the human body, and because of how we're exposed conditionally, we get used to the idea that we get distracted about something else is happening or someone else is talking in the room, and so we're having a conversation here and now someone else is talking, so I'm kind of listening to that conversation over there, or maybe I'm having a thought of what I had for breakfast yesterday, or maybe my stomach's not feeling good, and all of that thinking takes my focus away from being very, very single-minded, meaning being very, very sharp with my focus. I would say especially as Americans, and not to pick on that group, but most of us here in America seem to be more distracted than almost any other place. I won't say that's entirely true, but there's a lot of distraction that we create. Sometimes it's created through abundance, right? And we're a very, very rich nation and a very prosperous group of people, and that includes each one of you, meaning have the tools to be able to receive what I'm sharing. And yet we become so distracted by the commercials and the thoughts and what we're supposed to do and not supposed to do that we literally remove ourselves or basically disempower ourselves from the opportunity to take our souls forward in a meaningful way. So oftentimes when someone may come to me and I can, again, scan a body and see what would be out of alignment, and same way that you would look at a wire and see if there was any break in the insulation or perhaps a break in the conductor, which would create resistance, meaning electricity has to literally jump or hop across that gap. And at one point, if the gap's long enough, then it stops. And we can see that, meaning we can actually measure that, right? In the body, energetically, we can see the same kind of thing, where we can literally scan a body, and it's done in many different kinds of ways. But the ways that we're doing it physically is very, very rudimentary. And I'm not trying to be condescending about our technology, but it's not anywhere near our capacity to really be able to scan anything. That would be another body, let alone a tree, let alone a cat, anything, to literally see the flow. Now, in our mind, we typically will see different kinds of energy or feel different kinds of energy, and again, we want to compartmentalize it. That's this kind of energy, meaning that's a human being, or that's a female in terms of a sub-segment of the categorization of Homo sapiens. And yet, it's okay to do that, but there's so much more. So someone can be, human, and they can be female, and there's a whole lot more to them than just those two kinds of categories. And yet, to extend ourselves in that space, we have to really, really tune in. So if we're tuning into a body again, in science, they typically want to take these bodies, and we want to draw a bell curve graph, and we want to say that the middle of this graph is the median, and we have standard deviations, 1 or 2 or 3 different stanines outside of that standard deviation, which tells us that the majority of the people are in this first group, and then there's even a higher percentage in the second group, and the third group should be almost inclusive of everything, meaning a comprehensive, we'll call it, data set. And again, that's not all done physically. But if we look at the individual body and appreciate that each body is different in the same way that my eyes are different than yours, even though the concept of eyes are the same. If we scan how my body uses this part of my anatomy, we can see a flow, meaning an energetic flow. When I say flow, I want you to think like a current, where you can literally see the current if it's flowing, or the water through a river, that there's fluidity in the movement. And that's something that we can feel. Now, if I were touching here's a cord. If I were touching a cord, this is running electricity through it, I can literally grab this cord and tell you if it's plugged in or not. Meaning if it's plugged into, the wall, which is carrying the electricity through the cord, and we can actually feel it. Most of us haven't necessarily developed an ability to see that, meaning where we don't necessarily have access. Let's pretend that I'm not touching this cord, but we can actually see the cord, and the question is that cord live? And what I mean by that is there electricity flowing through that cord, and can you see it? And I say see, I'm talking about see it. And then can we feel it? And then can we use our other senses, spiritually speaking, to tune in to that, again, that flow of energy? Now, all of this is really cool. And in my opinion, the more that you play with it, the better that you get. And I say play, I'm talking about stepping into aspects of remembrance so that you can bring back memories of your choice to participate in what I will call divine energy, that which is true illumination. In that space of tapping into light, which comes from this singular place, which is source, singular in the sense that, maybe that's a misnomer. It's an infinite source of light, but that energy literally fuels this whole world. That's our world that we live in. It fuels this entire universe. And it's not necessarily, life isn't just on the planet Earth. And the space, meaning the dark space outside of Earth, there's oftentimes an idea that there's bleakness or darkness, or there's no energy there. And that's not true at all. That energy may be seen as dormant or quiet compared to the activity that we have here on Earth, but nonetheless, it's the same. And that's what I'm saying, that there isn't, it's not out of balance. The whole universe, if you will, is completely and perfectly balanced. And that's why it doesn't take a genius, if you will, to see that energy seems to be moving from different points to different points, but it isn't necessarily changing. And what I mean by changing, it's not necessarily going from one state to another. Gasoline into a car that becomes a fuel that ignites the internal combustion engine to give us speed to be able to go forward. In studying this, meaning in really giving it energy, pun intended, to give consideration, let's say, to how a vehicle moves, if we take the resistance away from the front of the vehicle, think of a vacuum, and we create a vacuum state in front of the vehicle, we're going to create an imbalance. And that imbalance is going to allow that vehicle, which is, let's say, on level ground, to want to move, meaning to literally go forward. And yet we don't see where this energy is coming from, meaning we don't necessarily see it coming from the power of a gasoline engine or horses pulling, this particular vehicle. It's just four wheels sitting on the ground, level ground, and yet if we create a vacuum in the beginning, it's going to create an opportunity for there not to be any resistance in the front of the vehicle, and the pushing is going to become, if you will, from the other side, because we've created a state of imbalance. In the same way that we would take a car and we would put it downhill, we can see the car, the vehicle, be pulled illusionarily down through gravity. And then, of course, when it gets to the bottom of the hill, what happens? It slows down, and at one point it gets to the bottom of the crest. Think of an ocean again, where we come to the bottom and suddenly it's at a state of rest again. But that's temporarily, meaning that's just a temporary position of energy, and yet energy is always there, present, whether it's space, whether it's in a car that's sitting, whether it's in a car that's going. And then sometimes we like to scientifically or physically or intellectually measure the efficiency of the energy. For example, in our cars, the internal combustion car, meaning that's the predominant car that we still have, electrical cars are coming on board, but the efficiency of that vehicle in terms of how well it processes energy, the fuel, through the process of, igniting the fuel and using the fuel to take the car forward is, can you guess? It's only 20% efficient. That's just within the engine. And we reduce efficiency based upon, the wind, the design of the vehicle, and if the brakes are on, right? Meaning all of that is going to impact our ability to go forward. But if you imagine going into space and not necessarily having anything so complicated done, just think of a capsule, meaning there's no propulsion whatsoever. This particular capsule, I want you to imagine, doesn't have any energy going forward. If we create a vacuum, let's call it a super vacuum in front, which in space becomes more difficult, but still not impossible, you're going to find that capsule that would be normally wanting to stay still is going to be affected by what? All kinds of things. One, the vacuum in front of it, of course, the gravitational pulls light as a resource of energy to literally push or pull that vehicle in different kinds of ways. Now, these things aren't necessarily super conscious yet in terms of the physical realm, but at one point they will be. And so for those of us who are playing and participating with energy, whether that's you're being the recipient of an energy that someone's helping you in terms of healing something, you can feel that. For example, sometimes I ask people when I'm sitting with them in person with their permission to put their hand in my hand to see if they can actually feel, that's physically feel, an energy transference from my body through this part of me to their hand. And sometimes people are thinking, you can see them processing what it is that's going on, what's he doing? Is this magic or something? And it's not. I'm just sharing with them in a very physical realm, helping them to become aware of this energy that's between our hands. And sometimes it can be reported as heat, cold sensation, and sometimes I will leave that in place, meaning where the hands are being connected, and I'll continue to talk, and then suddenly I'll stop the conversation, and I'll point to putting my hand in a passive position, meaning submissive position, and having someone put their hand in a controlling position, and let them become aware of what they're feeling. And then all of a sudden they're going to become aware that there is a transference of energy and perhaps a means of communication. For those of us who literally communicate in this way, predominantly, clairsentience, of course, this is where we're feeling, not just the room, but other people. And what are we feeling? Energy. And so when we feel, we don't necessarily always break down these feelings consciously in terms of what's happening within the energy beyond, does it feel safe? Is this a threatening energy? Is this something that we need to give some space to? Do we want to lean into it? These things are beautiful, again, on the most basic level. And what I'm wanting to do with this dialogue is to bring some superconscious awareness to how you're participating with energy so that when you go to connect, and this is a formal connection in terms of two people touching hands, that we're actually communicating. Now, you may think language, you may think numbers, you may think, again, music, but that's not all. There can be energy that's exchanged from one body to another that sometimes people call in romantic spaces as chemistry, right? Which is still another form of energy, where we can feel an energy of excitement being in the presence of somebody, and sometimes we don't know why that is. Meaning, why do we feel this way? Why do we feel energetically drawn to this particular person when we don't feel that with somebody else? Meaning, if we touched a bunch of hands, why does the 98th person that we have a hand connection with, why do we feel this flush energy running through us? Because there's some part of us that is creating a remembrance. Now, in the best of relationships, that means intimate relationships, this energy can serve you extremely well to know what it is that you're broadcasting. And think of that like a lighthouse where we have this broadcast of energy, and that's you, broadcasting this energy to this concept that I want to talk about really strongly, which is desire. Meaning, what kinds of things are you looking for, consciously or unconsciously, in this connection? Let's call it a date. And if the date is to be something that you want to create a relationship with, that would be a boyfriend or a girlfriend, then that energy is all going to be a part of that packet. And think of like a data packet or bits within the computer where we're transferring these little pieces and parts energetically to this other party that says, hey, I'm looking for a date, but not necessarily just somebody to hold hands with, meaning I want someone to go to the dance with, or maybe I'm looking for a relationship. Maybe that relationship's going to look like stereotypical marriage and or with children and a dog and a cat and a house with a white fence outside. And whatever that looks like is all in that packet that you're broadcasting. So as an energetic topic, sometimes people will come and share that they want very specific things in terms of energies that they find very important. And having done this for a long period of time, I always find how people answer the question extremely interesting in terms of what do you want, and let's say an example in your personal relationship. And someone will say, I want somebody that I can trust and somebody that will be there, that's loyal, and someone who's consistent and friendly and happy and excited to see me. And then they'll say, that's all I can think about, which is fine, but it may not be the totality of describing somebody's choice to be in an intimate relationship, meaning what I just described could maybe be fulfilled by having a pet, such as a dog, being a loyal dog who's very friendly and happy to see you, but not necessarily the same thing as having the intimate companionship with a person that's intellectually bonding with you, that shares maybe your values, perhaps some of the things or experiences that you've gone through, or maybe things that you still want to do. And all of that is still cool, and yet I have to say quite limiting. So when we put forth a desire, and I'm going to continue with this space of personal relationship or intimate relationship, our desire isn't just the words that we want to have someone who's fun to be with, or trustworthy, or intelligent, or spiritual, or again shares our beliefs, or likes to rock climb, or likes to walk, or likes dogs or cats, or whatever these things are. But you'll find that in love, the energy of love, that oftentimes, the things that we're asking for are met, and oftentimes they're exceeded. Meaning this diagram, or this set of things that we want, these list of things that we want, we're extended to through an invitation, and that invitation comes to this other party, and yet we find themselves extremely fascinating to the point that we literally want to stare into that person's eyes. We just find ourselves enamored to be in the presence of this person, again, energetically. It's not just, again, sexual chemistry. It's not necessarily just an emotion in terms of a singular emotion. It's literally a fulfillment of something much greater than that. And sometimes in sports or in activities such as entertainment, there's an energy that's transferred through the medium of this camera or through the sound system of being on stage as a performer, and you can feel the energy of the person or the band who's literally performing on your behalf. And that's really exciting. And this is why we go to the concerts, right? Meaning it's different than going to a concert, energetically speaking, than just having the recording. So why is that? It should be the same, right? What's the difference between going to the concert and actually having a recording? Maybe we bought a recording of the concert that we went to, but energetically there's something that we can feel. We know that there's something different, and that we're willing to pay out for it. To shell out for it, right? To go have that experience, to feel that performance, and to create, we'll call it even a visceral memory of what took place in that space. Sometimes that's a mistake that gets to be made, or something will be outside of the expected, which is all something that we wouldn't see in necessarily a recording, meaning just a recording that would be done in the studio. So when we talk about energy, we want to be really aware that we're always participating in feeling, sending, receiving energy, sometimes to the point that it's below our conscious threshold of understanding. What I want to do is bring that conscious understanding up so that we can have further understanding of what it is that you're emanating, and when I say emanating, creating, so that when you go to participate in any kind of manifestation, that you're aligned with that. Now, sometimes because of past conditioning, there's this idea that if I put forth a desire, that my desire won't be met, meaning that somebody, source, or if you will, even using the terms God, is kind of reeling back and saying, well, we'll see if we'll get to that request. It's kind of like a waiter at a restaurant that says, you put in the order, and we'll see if we turn that into the kitchen or not. And so you're sitting in the seat wondering if what is put forth as your desire is going to manifest in you having a bowl of soup. In the universe, of course, that's something that's not true at all. It's instantly, meaning my snapping the fingers is way too slow to how the universe actually responds to our desire. When we talk about the word desire and the word energy, energy moves through desire, meaning energy is not something that's separate, but it's directed with desire when we give something attention. So if I took my fingers again, and let's just use this as an example, and I said for you to give attention, focused energy to the top finger, well, you can do this right now if you want, you can feel this energy, and maybe you can feel the predominant finger, which is my forefinger. And then if I said, well, reverse that, I want you to feel the thumb, then you can actually feel that. And then at one point, I'm going to say, okay, can you go forefinger, thumb, thumb, forefinger, meaning I can create a rhythm of any kind, and then you can literally bounce between those two again and again and again. Now, I'm doing that mechanically or quite tangibly so that you can see that, and then when I do that, you don't have to necessarily do it with holding your fingers together. We can literally tune into something, meaning I can see something, I can feel something, I can know if an energy is traveling from a point to another point, or if there's a block. Now, if I'm dealing with a body, meaning a human body, obviously, and there's a desire for someone to become aware of an issue within a body, I've often teased that I don't have a medical license, of which I don't pretend to, and I'm not trying to be a doctor, and yet I don't even know a lot of the physical aspects. When I say that, I'm not able to name all the bones in the body or the ligaments or all the degrees of how the body is interconnected with fat and blood and et cetera, et cetera. I don't have that expertise from a physical perspective. It would be great to know, but it wouldn't necessarily help me. And that's kind of funny to say. So I can look at a body, and I can literally, like a CAT scan it from top to bottom to see if there's any issues. And I say issues, any blockages in the fluidity of the flow. Again, looking at a creek from down to top, you can see the creek's really running strong, and then suddenly at this section here, it stops. And when it does, then it becomes really easy to point to the problem. So when I tune into someone's body, I can literally go into their body and feel that's using my body to feel within their body. Again, think crosshairs like on an x-ray machine, and literally feel that, okay, the blockage is right here. Now, again, I physically don't know if that's this muscle versus that muscle. Generally speaking, I kind of do, but again, not someone who would be like a doctor or a physical therapist or perhaps even a nurse. But I can point to that. And I say point, I can literally take anything and point right to that spot. And I say we can, in our choice to have that desire. That's real important. That piece that sometimes is heard as a thought can come and go, and the idea of desire is a desire. And yet it isn't. Putting focused attention on our desire is how we get to know that there's a blockage in this particular point right here. Not over there, not over here, not over here, not over here, not down here, but right here. And we can triage this. I mean, we can triage that there's an energetic block here, and maybe that's caused by an emotion, a past life, or a lot of other things that can be brought to the surface. Again, in our choice to bring awareness. And how do we create awareness? Through desire. So with questioning, this is why questions become a really cool tool, because through a question, we take someone's attention and we can bring it to a focal point with a question so that they're putting their thought on this particular thing. So if I said, if you, at sixth grade, were you ever hit in your sixth grade year, your body will actually resonate that. Your mind's going to do that too, right? It's going to go scanning, linearly, kind of like a computer. Sixth grade, okay, sixth grade, just going to go back in time, 365 days, and trying to measure, determine, did you get a hit on this day versus that day versus that day? And that process is okay, but it's enormously slow compared to this other way, meaning the other way is, again, energetically. So the moment that I put your attention on something that happened to you at sixth grade, that maybe that you've forgotten about, I'm doing that not to bring something up as an issue. I'm doing that to say, hey, this is part of the issue that we're working on, meaning that you have come here to ask me energetically to share with you. And this is done a lot, where I'll say, hey, did something happen to you in sixth grade? And someone may say, no, nothing happened to me that I'm aware of. And then, because of I have awareness, and I'm asking someone my question not to bait them along, because I want them to participate in the process. And that's what I want you to do with you in this broadcast right now. To have you follow me, but to engage with me, not necessarily me just doing it, because it doesn't necessarily have the same kind of value. So as you put your attention, your desire, in becoming aware that maybe you got hit, the body will light up like a Christmas tree. Literally will show you different points where an energetic exchange took place, where someone slapped you or there's a tooth pulled. When I was in sixth grade, I had all of my canine teeth removed. My body will tell you that. You don't have to necessarily look at my teeth to discover that. You can, if you're a dental student, and you've already noticed that. But if you look at the body, it's going to resonate that there was something that took place. Sometimes it could be thought of as a trauma or dramatic piece, and trauma is oftentimes thought of as a negative word, and it doesn't have to be seen as that way, just something that happened. It doesn't happen, an event took place. So Weston went to school, and he met somebody at school, that's an event. It's not trauma. It's not even drama. It's just I met somebody. So if I had my teeth pulled, even if it went down flawlessly, the body is going to be able to share that with you. If you scan that body, then you can say, oh, those teeth were removed inappropriately. They were removed because mom and dad wanted to have them removed, or maybe the orthodontist wanted to have them removed, or there was a health issue that was taking place with the embodiment. And how can we do that? Through energy. So, meaning our desire to be able to put focused attention on that body. Now, when we do that, when we put our focused attention with one another, this is where we become very, very intentful, or sometimes we use the term mindful, where I'm engaging with you in a very, very specific kind of way. Specific, what I mean by that is, let's say, to reflect something, again, a blockage or an issue, or just awareness about how you can get from here to there. Lots of people have come to this realm, and they're not even cognizant of what they've come here to do. And I talked about that in a video called, what is your spiritual blueprint? And if you haven't seen that, please check that out. But to see that energetic choice, that desire to come here into this incarnation, and to, sometimes forget what it is that we're doing here, meaning I say we, that's you, giving yourself permission to observe what it is that you feel drawn to. again, think of the word energy again, where you feel drawn to something and you may not know why. Maybe there's a keyboard before you and somehow there's some part of you that feels energetically drawn to play with the keyboard. There could be a zillion reasons for that. It could be from computers, that maybe you have used a keyboard before. Maybe this keyboard is different than that of a computer keyboard, but maybe it's a keyboard of a piano or something similar to that. So we tune into energy as a means to knowing where it's taking us through its imbalance. This is how we can see it. This in this realm. This is why we can know that imbalance is something that we can physically see. But interestingly enough, in the human body, we don't tend to notice our choice to be out of balance, especially within our own self, until we're severely out of balance. And what I mean by that is we're walking along the sidewalk, we're doing just fine, and all of a sudden at one point I'm talking to somebody and then I'm going down, meaning I'm falling to the ground. And it's only then, that in my choice to fall, that I suddenly have a state of awareness that goes, wow, something happened, most all the time externally, something, this curb jumped up and grabbed my toe and made me fall, which isn't true at all. Perhaps that imbalance has been going on for quite a while, and I haven't chosen to see it, meaning energetically within my whole body. And so me falling physically is just another lower vibrational, spiritual, physical ramification, energetic ramification of me falling, especially if that happens as a pattern. Now, sometimes people have patterns that are very, very repetitive, and they still don't see it. I'm thinking of a woman that in Chicago that I facilitated many years ago, where she had a real issue with moving vehicles. She'd gotten hit by a bus. She'd gotten hit by a truck. She'd been hit by a car and a bicycle. And you can appreciate within her body that there was a part of her that perhaps felt really uncomfortable about going outside. But again, energetically, what was she broadcasting that would create this kind of attraction? You know, certainly I don't think that she was interested in wearing a shirt that said, you know, come hit me with your vehicle as you go by. That she was really kind of freaked out, meaning she was paranoid to literally come outside because of these experiences, these repetitive experiences that she was ultimately co-creating or showing herself. And sometimes we don't see that. And so having someone like myself, if you will, as a spiritual mirror to reflect what's going on becomes cool, so that they can become aware, the person becomes aware to say, oh wow, I didn't see that, didn't know that, and then they create a balance. And to do that, to create a balance, we need to get oftentimes in a state of stillness. And this is why a state of meditation is really, really beautiful, because we begin to quiet the mind. We really begin to get in touch with the lack of movement, the stillness. And sometimes with certain philosophies, think of Buddhists, for example, there's a desire for them to participate outside of this concept of desire, which, if you think about it, and I'm teasing with you, it's actually kind of funny, because it's their desire, think of this, to not have desire. So they're taking the natural physical desire that we have, innate desire to eat, drink, and etc., to participate, or to say I like gum, or I like that kind of a pencil, or that kind of a pen to write with. They literally set those aside so they can get into this very, very silent space, this almost like a void space, this quiet space, to have access to something that's quite divine, which is something that we can all do outside of this noise. So when I talk about desire, again, become aware that I'm not talking about just your thinking desire, but more importantly, an innate desire. So if it's my innate desire to have this connection, to have access to something that's outside of this realm, and to do so in a loving way, a compelling way to help you and to help others, just because it feels good to me, the person. Not that I'm trying to grandstand or position myself as someone that's really somebody, but it just really feels right for me to play the guitar in this way. And what I mean by that is there's a desire for me to bring in that information and to share that information energetically with you in that way. It's no different than somebody grabbing a banjo and playing because that's a desire to connect in that modality to share a certain kind of energy, which would extend to how they play it, the means in which they play it. That could be the style in which they play it. Maybe they hold the banjo differently than other people. And, of course, what we feel when someone's participating in that space. So when we come down to this one word that hopefully is a really, really key and very, very important word, which is the word desire. We don't want that to be limited to a thought desire. So if you take that comment and mesh it with what we talked about just a moment ago, if someone has a desire to be with someone who's tall, good looking, successful, what does that mean? Maybe monetarily, that they have a happy demeanor. Maybe they're I think this would be important as a desire within an intimate relationship, that they're available, meaning that they are able to participate with, let's say, you in that relationship. It doesn't really work, does it, if you have these connections and the person's unavailable, meaning they're off doing something else with somebody else. So when we talk about a desire, it's not necessarily just those things, again, not just necessarily just the words, but there's a feeling that we have in connecting to this person. And how do we create that? Well, we do that by ourselves having desire, which is outside of what I will call the Buddhist intention to not have a desire, which is talking to the head, but to have a divine desire, if we can use that term, to use this force, this energy, to communicate with us so that we can have contact, interconnection with ourselves and with other people in this state of fluidity. And we can feel that all the time. We can feel that in a conversation where there's a really cool, enlightening conversation, and then all of a sudden it takes a turn. And you can feel that there's almost a heaviness, that the subject matter of the person, whether they're tapping into, the energy in the room changed. When I say they changed, they changed. And now hopefully that makes sense. Their energy changed. You could feel it. You could note it, on a graph, that the energy changed in a room right to that particular spot, in the same way that we can point to a particular piece of the embodiment. Now, the question is, are they aware that the energy changed in a room? Meaning, are they aware that they were bouncing around in a very, very happy space, and then suddenly there was a drop in energy? Sometimes you can hear it. Sometimes you can see it. Sometimes you can physically see it. Sometimes you can smell it. But if we turned off all the physical senses, literally, you still have access to being able to connect to that energy and know that there's a change, a delta, that we were flying high, if you will, like riding in a plane, and all of a sudden it took this gigantic dip from 20,000 feet to 5,000 feet, meaning in a very short period of time. Believe me, you can feel that as your nose diving down. And we want to be able to tune into that, mostly within our own selves, so that we can create a more balanced space. Now, I was talking about couples in terms of how they go to dance, and when we go to a state of oneness, and then suddenly they become at one. Now, ultimately, if we're going to practice that, even outside of any kind of relationship, when I say any relationship, that would be with you and an intimate partner, you as a friend, you in a relationship with a vendor, or you with nature, we want to get in this state of harmony. And when we create this harmonious space, literally being at one, and you'll hear that term a lot, if that's our desire, then that desire of oneness takes place, and what happens is our perception opens up. When I say our perception, I'm not talking about just our mind. That opens up too, but it goes way beyond the physical mind. Suddenly we're able to see things or perceive things or have understanding of things that goes outside of maybe, again, and I'll just point to me, my physical experiences. Again, like I shared, I'm not a doctor. And I can't name you all the parts of the body, but I can sure point to it, meaning, any child can do that. But all we need to do is become aware of where these points are, and then ultimately to connect these different points to what would be described as maybe called the issue, or several issues. It doesn't have to be a singular one. What's creating this body to begin to shut down? And we're doing that before the body hits the ground. What I mean, before it goes to trip all the way down flat. And we want to be able to do that within ourselves. And so if we have a desire to put on ourselves and to become aware of how we're participating with energy, that's how we're receiving it, and then ultimately how we're broadcasting. And those things mirror one another. Now, in a topic such as sales, having taught that as an experience way back as a part of my history in business, there's a analogy that can be made, and sales is really pretty easy and it fits here, that most people, when they first go to sell, and most people don't like selling. And the reason why is because there's oftentimes a manipulative or an intimidating energy, or someone's trying to get something from you, which is they want your money. And that's one way of existing sales, but you can feel that. If someone's genuinely trying to help you, and they're coming with that energetic, we'll even call it that love, then that's different. You don't feel like someone's trying to take advantage of you. They're literally trying to help you get the car that you say that you want, which is, again, the desire. So when that takes place, you can feel that exchange, the truth of someone really wanting to help you or to engage with you at that level. And so you move forward, meaning you're drawn to that particular means because you can feel that there's a genuine or authentic means in which that person wants to help you to your desire, your intention, which is really, really cool. And again, if you're aware, you can feel where someone's just lying through their teeth, trying to get you to believe anything that they can share with you, to telling you that whatever that they're selling is the best of the best of the best, and perhaps you're even pay overpriced for it because you're not tuned in, you're not listening or not aware to those energies that they're sending. Now, if someone's doing that from a sales perspective, they're communicating a lot about themselves. They're communicating a lot about perhaps the product or the service that they're representing, and certainly maybe even the company. And all that's pretty cool. But if we come back to the other side, most people, when they go to sell, let's say that you were in that position, they tend to sell the way that they buy. Which if you get in touch with it from an energetic perspective, it's just saying, I like to be waited in a restaurant in this kind of way. So if someone greets me and says, would you like a glass of water? And that's something that I desire, then I find that to be attentive, meaning I tend to like that. And we reciprocate to that like with leaning into it. So we don't feel sold as much as someone says, wow, Weston's table likes a lot of water. And with that, if someone's going to serve that, they're going to sell me, water, and as a element or a piece of my beverage service or part of my meal. And that selling, again, in the beginning is very, very basic, where someone's taking, again, the sales process, and they're saying, I buy based upon, in this kind of way, this kind of form, and I'm going to sell based upon that form. Now, when we go further, we realize that, well, the way I personally buy may be different than how you buy. And so we have to throw, my preferences to the side, in essence, my desires. And I have to set that aside to become very, very focused on you. And how do we do that? Well, it's very basic in sales because if you just listen to what someone's telling you, most of the time they'll tell you what it is that they're looking for. In essence, they'll tell you their desire. And if you don't know, then, through a couple simple questions that you don't need to go to sales school for, you can ask what it is that they're looking for so that you can, again, help them. And if you're in integrity, you won't sell them something or even present something that doesn't fit for what they've come in to basically want/desire. Now, if they don't know what they want, then sometimes as a salesperson that we will bring to their attention that we have these kinds of books or these kinds of foods or these kinds of restaurants or these kinds of vacations that they might give consideration to. And if that catches their attention, what I mean by that is their desire, then they'll begin to focus in on that. And you can feel it from an energetic perspective. But we don't need to push at that. We don't need to pull at that. We don't need to rope tie somebody and slam them down to the ground in some kind of hog-tied, branding a cow kind of a way. We don't. We can just honor the fact that there's an energetic exchange that's taking place in that transaction of being sold or selling, and honoring that that can be done in a balanced space. Now, as simple as that is, I would say for the most part in the world, we don't have that. We have a lot of people that are trying to get what it is that they want, and they're going to push that want upon you, and that's unfortunate because it will never work long term. But if someone's really coming with you to help and dial into you, again, energetically tuning into you, and they're helping you get what you want. So if you're looking for a personal relationship and I knew somebody, then of course, I'm not getting paid for that. I'm helping that introduction to take place. And there's a joy in energetically knowing that this person is looking for these kinds of things, and this person over here may not know what they're looking for, and maybe I have the ability to put them together through an introduction. And that introduction becomes like, wow, Weston introduced me to so-and-so, and that became my boyfriend / my husband to be / forever. And what took place? Nothing. Beyond an acute awareness to their desires, that's party one and party two, and to bring them together in the same way that we're creating a connection within the body to say, hey, we've got a block here, and we need to get that block out of the way. Now, in that understanding of a block, we want to use our desire to be able to see states of resistance or blocks so that we can address something that sometimes we're taught conditionally that we may be blocking. So somebody may put forth a desire and then create this kind of resistance to the very desire that they have, meaning there's no connection, energetic connection to this desire. And so we have the word desire, and yet it's hollow. There's no energy that's allowed to participate. And with that, think of like going to a restaurant and putting your order in, and your order is not really a connected order. You can tell that the person who's taking the order may or may not have heard you, may or may not have really digested what it is that you were trying to communicate, and yet they are processing it, but not necessarily in a very, very attentive way. In a really high-end restaurant, they're extremely dialed into that, meaning they're very, very focused on what it is that you're looking for, and perhaps even going outside of that, even offering you suggestions to your desire that would be complementary to what it is that you're trying to create in terms of that meal service. And that's really cool. You go to McDonald's and those things aren't necessarily mentioned beyond, do you want a Coke with your burger? Meaning that's something that someone has scripted. But that's different in terms of really connecting. And again, we can feel this. So how many times have you gone for like takeout order? And sometimes this is very well scripted in the food industry. Well, someone will ask you the question. They take your order, they'll smile at you, and you can feel that this is all very canned. And there's no selling going on, really. And then, except for this one question, and then they'll ask you this question, and this question may come like, how's your day today? And it's completely out of context to the dialogue, but it's perfectly tuned or timed to this particular moment, because we've come through the conversation where they're hoping that you're going to give them a tip. And this is a takeout order. So the question is, do we tip them or do we not tip them? And so we have had the reception of them taking our order, which is nice. It's been easy, a flawless space physically, but there's not really a connection, a depth of connection. And then suddenly this question feels disconnected, like how's your day today, like someone is reading you a teleprompter script. How was your day today? And we feel that, and we can say fine, or maybe we reciprocate good, and they're doing that with the intention to, hope that you're going to write a check or give them 20% more, or 30% more, or 50% more, whatever those numbers are, so that they can enhance their business. But it's very different when someone's energetically connecting with you. Then we don't even have to have that question. We started from the get-go with this connection of, I'm helping you, not how's your day. I'm helping you in this moment to do something that you want to eat. And maybe you don't know what you want, and I can tell you what's good and what's bad in the restaurant. Again, from my perspective, but if we're selling, we're not going to do it from just my perspective, because maybe I don't like Brussels sprouts and you do. So, right, it would be silly for me to take that and invalidate what it is that you want. And then so I will ask you a question, helping you, so that they make really great Brussels sprouts here. And the person may go, I love Brussels sprouts. And again, you're not sold something as much as you're energetically helping them or complimenting them to the other side. So what I'm trying to communicate is the following, that we're energetic vessels, number one, that are broadcasting this from the get-go, before we even come to this realm. As we come through this process of being born, we often get very, very conditioned to process in certain kinds of ways, meaning energetically. And we tend to put ourselves in a state of conformity, and thus eliminating or losing our ability to really communicate energetically what it is that we want. Sometimes, maybe more than just a couple times, people put away their desires, which in one sense, and this is kind of an exaggeration, it's almost like a criminal act. Meaning if we take our desires and we invalidate them so that you can't have a desire, what do you want? I don't know. And the reason someone might respond that way is because now they're afraid to put forth a desire, because maybe in the past, via their mom and dad, they've been disappointed. And if that happens once, twice, or three times, then of course they're not broadcasting the idea that they can have something. They're broadcasting an energy of lack, and I want you to see my shoulders curling in, and then they can't have it. As opposed to someone who's saying, no, I'm going to have what I want, and so they put forth that request, that energetic request. And the mind may not know, and this is a very key point of our dialogue as well, how. Because it's not capacitated to know how. It doesn't need to know how. But if you put forth a desire and an energy, those go hand in hand, in a way that's thorough, complete, focused, and focused does not mean that you need to affirm it to death as much as just be connected to it, then we can literally let go. and allow this to take place in the state of being imbalanced. We don't have to push anything. We don't have to pull anything. We just know. We don't even have to trust. That's an interesting concept in itself. Know that the universe responds quicker than my fingers can snap, let alone that you can hear them. So when it's that quick, then we want to give further attention to how we put our energy together through focused awareness, specifically through desires. If you take away anything from this dialogue, it would be one or two things, if not 150 things. But energetically becoming aware of what it is that you're broadcasting. Two, that you are receiving, you're receiving what you're broadcasting. This is why we talk about, the way you sell, the way you present yourself is the way that you're going to be receiving. But we want to set that aside so that you can open up further to that. So I'm not really talking about the sales process as much as you opening up further to those things that maybe go outside of your experience. For example, if someone says that they want something, and yet they'll usually say something right as a tagline right beneath that. They may say, but I've never experienced that before, or I've never had that before, which is invalidating the very thing that they wanted. I want a girlfriend, but I've never had one before. I want a girlfriend, but I can't have one. And so the universe says, okay, there's no message, there's no complete desire with that, and so it becomes muddied water for nothing to reflect. And of course, gets to be regurgitated again and again until the person thinks that they really can't have whatever it is that they want to put together. But when we step past what I will call this place of resistance, by becoming aware, and again, that's done through desire, then we become aware that, oh wow, I'm creating a slowness, think like a traffic jam in this particular area. It's not stopped. It's just something to become aware of, and yet that's a problem. Problem in the sense that I don't want to be slow. So if I'm wanting to accelerate it to create very, very quickly, I want to leave all of these states of resistance behind. That would be my past experiences. Conditional past experiences. And when I say past, it's always in the past. That gets projected into this moment, into the future. So our choice to be in touch with energy and to realize it's a really cool thing that happens before we come into this realm, happens as we're coming into this realm, and it happens as we're continuing to process in this realm. We don't need to be conditioned outside of our true energy. And if we choose that, then we become very disempowered and oftentimes very, very unhappy. Unhappiness and disempowerment go literally hand in hand. So for us to desire to become connected and really, really comfortable with all of the capacities that we have to do in this realm, then we want to set forth some crazy desires. And I say crazy to the mind, but not of course to your ability to be connected. And when we do that, then we're able to broadcast and receive, and then we start creating this miraculous ride that becomes life in the coolest kind of way. And the more that we do that consciously means, during the daytime, at night, all the time, the funner that this ride gets. We, in essence, start to learn the nature of the game in terms of our incarnation. It's a really fun topic. I barely scratched the surface of it, and I hope you've had fun with it as I have. So thank you for joining me, and I look forward to talking with you again.